He looked at me like he already knew what I was thinking, and I didn't look away. My husband still kisses me before work, but not like he used to. These days, it feels like checking a box, like a man turning off a light he no longer notices. He doesn't forget to say, "Love you," but sometimes I wonder if he even hears himself say it. We still sit across from each other at the dinner table, fork and knife moving in rhythm, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space where conversation used to live. I fold his laundry the way he likes. I keep the house at the temperature he prefers. I reorder the vitamins, pay the bills, send his mother a birthday card with both our names signed at the bottom. He never forgets to thank me, but he never really looks at me either. I'm not unloved. I'm just unseen. Sometimes I stand in front of the bathroom mirror at night and study my own reflection, searching for the woman I used to be. I touch the edge of my jaw, wondering when the softness settled in. I pull at my skin, trying to remember the last time someone looked at me like they noticed. The front door had been sticking for almost a month. I brought it up casually twice. My husband nodded both times, saying he'd get to it this weekend or the next. I stopped mentioning it. So when I saw the service van pull into the driveway on a gray Tuesday morning, I assumed he'd finally called someone. He hadn't told me, but that wasn't unusual. We didn't talk about the little things anymore. We just handled them. I opened the door, still wearing my robe, coffee warm in my hand, hair twisted into a low knot. I expected a clipboard and a name badge. Maybe someone who would track in mud, apologize too much, then do a rush job. What I got was him. He stepped out of the van like he had nowhere else to be. Tall, solid, maybe mid-40s, though something in his posture felt younger. Or steadier. He wore work boots and a dark shirt that had seen real labor. His hands hung loose at his sides. Not tense, not awkward. Just aware. "You called about the door?" His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It had a kind of weight to it. Like someone who didn't waste words. "Yes," I said. I stepped aside. He entered without a glance around, moving directly to the doorframe. He touched the trim with his fingertips, then leaned into the hinge with his shoulder, testing the resistance. "It catches right before it shuts," I offered. He nodded but didn't respond. He crouched, reached into a canvas tool bag, and pulled out a flathead screwdriver. I watched as he made one small adjustment, then another. Focused, efficient, but not rushed. I hovered by the staircase, watching him work, pretending to check my phone. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. He looked up once and said, "This isn't the original frame, is it?" "No. We replaced it after the remodel." He nodded. "Too modern. Doesn't match the rest of the house." I laughed softly, caught off guard. I said the same thing. He stood up then, slowly. Looked at me. Really looked. "But you let him pick it?" There was no malice in his tone. Just observation. Like he wasn't asking, just stating what he saw. I felt my breath catch, small and quick. "It was easier," I said. I don't know why I said that. I'd never said it out loud before. He nodded, not judging, not smiling either. He stepped closer to inspect the top hinge. Close enough that I caught the scent of wood and clean sweat. Not cologne, not soap, just him. He pointed to a faint crack in the upper corner. "That's where your problem starts. Hairline fracture. Might look fine for now, but give it time." He turned to look at me. Most things break slow before they break all at once. He held my gaze. I didn't answer. He returned to his work, but slower now. Every movement measured. He asked me to shut the door a few times so he could test it. Each time, I felt the space between us tighten, like a string pulled just a little more. He didn't ask about my husband. I didn't offer. But in the silence, there were questions. Echoes. Something just beneath the surface. When he finished, he wiped his hands on a cloth and handed me the invoice. As I reached for it, his fingers grazed mine. Not a full touch, just a pass, but deliberate. I looked up. He didn't look away. Outside, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. My husband's car. The man stepped back. Just one step. Enough. He opened the fixed door, looked over his shoulder. He waited for me to say something. I didn't. And that silence said too much. But the moment didn't end there. The moment lingered. He didn't leave right away. He stood just outside, as if he was waiting for something. A word. A sign. Maybe even a lie. My husband honked once, a sharp, polite beep to let me know he was home early. The sound cut through the quiet. The man outside didn't flinch. He slowly tucked the invoice under his arm and stepped back toward his van. Before getting in, he turned, caught my eye one more time. He didn't smile, just nodded. Once, like we had made a silent agreement. Then he was gone. I stood in the hallway, hand still clutching the edge of the door he had just fixed. It no longer stuck. It shut perfectly. Clean. Smooth. But something in me felt just the opposite. Like something had come unlatched. My husband came inside a few minutes later, talking about traffic and something he heard on the radio. I nodded, I smiled. I answered when he asked if I wanted tea. I even laughed when he made a joke about the door finally working. But I didn't tell him about the man who fixed it. I didn't mention his eyes. Or his silence. Or the way he'd said nothing at all, and still made me feel more seen in an hour than I had in years. That night, I folded clothes in the bedroom while my husband watched the news. I held one of his shirts in my hands for longer than I needed to. It still smelled like his cologne. Familiar. Safe. But I felt nothing. I lay awake long after he fell asleep beside me. The moonlight stretched across the floor, illuminating the new edge of the door, the place where the crack had been. I thought about the way the man had looked at it. At me. Most things break slow before they break all at once. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be fixed, or if I'd already started to fall apart. He didn't touch me. Not really. But something in me didn't forget him. The morning after, I stood in the hallway and opened the door he'd fixed. It no longer stuck. It moved smooth and silent, like it had never been broken. But every time I touched the handle, something flickered under my skin. He had been here. In this hallway. In this air. And somehow it felt like a part of him still was. I made breakfast like I always do. Toasted bread. Sliced banana. Checked the eggs for cracks. My husband sat at the counter, reading the news aloud between bites. I nodded in all the right places, smiled when I was supposed to, and yet, inside me, something had shifted. Not guilt. Not exactly. It was something quieter. Like stepping into a room where the furniture had been rearranged. Familiar, but off. He hadn't kissed me. He hadn't touched me in any way that could be called inappropriate. But he had looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time in years, I felt like a woman who still mattered. All day, I found myself glancing out the window without meaning to, listening for a van that wouldn't return, folding towels and thinking of how he said, "Most things break slow before they break all at once." I didn't know if he meant the door, or me. By Wednesday, I'd memorized the sound of my husband's car pulling into the driveway. I knew I had a window of 30 minutes between his departure and the time the house went still again. And it was in that space, those quiet, permissionless mornings, that I started opening the back window he mentioned. The one that didn't shut quite right. Just to see. The third morning, I opened it wider. And when I turned around, he was there. Same boots. Same stillness. He stood just outside the fence, hands in his pockets, eyes already on me. He didn't call out. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. I stepped out onto the porch, heart tight against my ribs. We didn't say hello. He nodded toward the window. You were right. It pulls away in the corner. I nodded. You saw that from the driveway? He gave a small smile. I noticed things. We didn't move. Just stood there, breathing the same air, sharing the same silence. And in that stillness, I felt a charge between us that had nothing to do with doors or broken frames. He stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. You don't have to say anything, he said. I didn't. His eyes dropped to my hand resting on the porch rail. And for the briefest second, his fingers brushed mine. Not a full touch, not a grip, just enough to wake something in me I thought had gone quiet. We didn't kiss. We didn't even speak. But something stayed with me after he left. He turned to go, said he'd be by tomorrow to look at the window, and I let him. Every morning, for a week, he came. Sometimes he worked. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes we just stood there, in the places between the things we couldn't say. He never asked for anything, never reached for more. But with every glance, every breath, every pause, we drifted further from what could be explained. Until the day everything cracked. My husband was late coming home from work. I didn't expect him until dinner. So when the man came by around 4, I let him in. I hesitated, but then I opened the door. He walked through the back, nodding once as he passed me. I offered him a drink. He declined, but he didn't leave. We stood in the kitchen. The same space where I'd prepared 1,000 meals, had 1,000 empty conversations. And in that silence, he looked at me again, like I was the only thing in the room worth noticing. He said my name, soft, just once. He said my name, gentle, careful. I looked at him, just looked. But the sound of the garage door interrupted everything. My husband was home, too early. He entered through the side, cheerful, distracted. Stopped when he saw us. The man stepped back, calm, still. My husband looked between us. Once, then again. No one spoke, but something in his face broke. He didn't yell. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. And maybe he was. He turned to the man and said, "You can go." The man nodded. No protest. No defense. Just left. I stood there, waiting for my husband to say something. He didn't. He walked to the sink, poured himself a glass of water, stared out the window. Then, without turning around, he said, "I noticed you disappeared long before this." That night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. In the morning, he didn't say goodbye. He left the ring on the sink. I left the rest.